All right, welcome everybody to our panel on data science modules and connectors, our funny terminology that we use for doing data science in classes that are outside of the core of computer science and stats. And I would say for both Aliana and myself that it's a passion of ours. It's something that we really believe in and love and do and love our work because of the different things that you do, there's some things that you do that sort of bring meaning and fulfillment to your day. Quick introduction. Aliana is a senior.
Yes.
One more semester to go.
One more semester. Hi. I'm almost done. I actually study data science, one of the first classes to graduate at UC Berkeley. And I've been on the modules team since I was a sophomore, so 2018. And now I'm the team lead for the department.
It's not a department, but it's really hard for us to forget to say. People say that all the time. Someday we'll be a department. Yeah, and I got a position here a couple years ago to work on the modules and connectors. Actually, I started off just working with modules, and I'm also a lecturer, and I also teach a connector course, so I can speak to both of these. We're just going to give you an overview of the modules program, a few examples, an overview of the connectors program, and then a few examples. I'll go in a little aside about economics, which is the space I'm interested in. And, a little tagline here is that we think we want to make inclusive curriculum to make the bigger project of data science and STEM itself more inclusive. Oops, I keep advancing the wrong tab. Here we go. All right, why are we doing this? We think that there's not enough opportunities for people that aren't in data science classes to be introduced to data science. We want places where students in other classes can touch data science. We think that it's hard to teach computing and quantitative approaches to students in other types of classes. We also want to build bridges. Data science is new, it's growing, it's expanding. Data science at Berkeley is now a division, hoping to become a college. So we're interested in building bridges with faculty and students on other parts of campus. And we deeply believe that the project of data science is inherently interdisciplinary. It's inherently about working with other disciplines, the way the major is structured. You take classes in other disciplines as part of the major. Where the rich applications of data science come from involves knowledge of different domains. So throughout, we think it is an interdisciplinary project. A brief intro to modules and connectors overall is that we can leverage a couple of powerful things on the campus. First of all, as we tried to show yesterday, we have this UC Berkeley-wide data hub. And the way they constructed the data hub was not that an instructor needed to go and ask permission and sign up their class. You could just go and throw your class on there. And so they left it open for experimentation. And we did a bunch of documentation explanation to faculty. And so all sorts of different faculty are encouraged to come and try out teaching with this approach because there's this campus-wide resource for them. And it's open source. It relies on open source packages. It's cloud-based, so it's like, reaching equally to all different people. So it's really accessible. And then we've been able to work with amazing data science students who are incredibly poised and articulate. And they've been able to help us develop curriculum, to teach material, and importantly, they've been able to help us cross these disciplinary boundaries. And it's even more interesting because sometimes you get a data science student who's a biology major who will help to make the biology curriculum. But sometimes you get somebody who's like, the biology major who's helping to make the economics curriculum. And so there's some funny, combinations of cross-disciplinary that do occur. To you.
Yeah. So the way that we've been able to do this is through Jupyter notebooks. So they essentially are going to be in the form of a lecture or a couple labs, maybe some homework assignments. And it really gives students work hands-on with data sets relevant to the courses that they're studying. So like Eric was talking about in biology and environmental science, and then we have one in a French class across many different disciplines. And the goal is to have all students in all disciplines experience data science and feel comfortable with their experience. I have reached out to many of my friends and undergraduates in brand new fields and just even shown them some of the modules. And it's just a way to help show that they can bring something to it by having that domain knowledge. And then we can also assist with the gaps in the data science learnings.
Oh, I need to progress it.
So here are a couple of the classes that we've been part of. Berkeley has this program called American Cultures. Every single student at UC Berkeley has to take an American Cultures course. And this is just to learn about America. A lot of times it talks about inequalities in the US. All of these classes have about 100 to 300 students, and they come from every major because every single student has to take it. So you can choose to take it in whatever department you want. I think I took Anthropology 3AC or something like that. They have the AC at the end. And so the notebooks that we have made have been in sociology, psychology, ethnic studies, engineering. We'll show you some of these. The first notebook that I ever helped develop was SFM 1623 AC about environmental justice, and all the way to data arts. It's been really special. And then finally, or most recently, a course called Data 4 AC talks specifically about data. And this is the most recent one that we've had the most work be done
And there'll
with.
be more about that tomorrow morning. Okay, keep going.
Yeah. So this is one of the notebooks that we made. We're going to kind of go through some examples for right now. This was in Ethnic Studies 21 AC. So this looked at prisons and the different populations after prison realignment. So what was the changes when it went from prisons to jails? And the way that we tried to introduce this to an ethnic studies class when most students were very intimidated by looking at code was through asking qualitative questions or quantitative questions, but not having them code right away. And then continuing by having them do the examples like right after showing them an example of us. And I think for this course too, I would go and present it. So we have students, undergrads themselves, not just me, presenting and showing up to the classes and really being invested in making other undergraduates feel comfortable and being able to utilize data science to contribute to their own fields. Go to the next example.
Okay.
The next one, which the instructor is Khalid Kadir, and this was a smaller course, but this was for engineers talking about engineering, environment, and society, and we utilized mapping software in a Jupyter notebook to look at the differences in exposure depending on emissions, GDP. This is one other example. This one we actually have a demo at the end, but this is one of the environmental health or environmental science policy and management, or ESPM courses. So this is the one where environmental justice is in. Environmental health and development was this one, talking about redlining and looking at maps to apply the concepts to our local area. So students were able to see those maps and see the effect that the environment had on them as well.
Great. I just wanted to take it on a little other tour. We had somebody commenting on one of the previous panels about digital humanities. So I wanted to say we did have a module in a French class where they were reading literature about contemporary Paris over the last 100 years. And so they were showing the change in the demographics, where it used to be, who lived where in Paris. The wealthier people live in the suburbs, the wealthier people live in the core, and they had some previous studies that were done on this, and then they got like a contemporary data set where the students could bring it in and make a map showing who lives in which neighborhoods. And this is also done by profession, like who's blue collar and who's white collar. So they were relating that to changing narratives about the city of Paris. So that's a nice one. And also just to reach back here where, you know, let's think about how this works, right? The instructor comes to us. These are led by instructors. Instructor comes with us with an idea and sort of a motivation and how this would relate to their class. And then the students can go and sort of work on that and build it and try to bring in the data set and get the map to build and maybe iterate a little bit with the instructor. But then, you know, in the case of the French class, perhaps like the instructor doesn't quite know how to code, but knows how to get students into the notebook, to get them through a notebook, and to answer or do some analysis related to the notebook. Similarly, with the ethnic studies professor with the prison realignment, she's very passionate and she has repeated the notebook multiple times because she likes giving her students this like practical tool and this experience, like try this thing that's, you know, it's going to seem like an edge to you and support each other to do it. The professor herself doesn't necessarily do the coding. We like help them out and provide extra office hours and support. Aliana actually went into the class and like led them through the notebook. But the professor is like, you know, supporting us to come into their class without actually needing to learn to code to do it. And that's sort of an interesting part of the way this is getting deployed. Now, we also have a few in biology class. This is a big frontier, I think. It was interesting to hear Michael Jordan earlier today talk about how much the biology was the start of where he saw data science coming from. I guess what's interesting in some of the biology classes we've done is that you can combine different aspects of a lab notebook. Like, so we had a biology book where people could gather data, they could analyze the data and graph some results. Here, you're not necessarily doing data science, but you're, you know, like something complicated, big data, but you're integrating statistics into the workflow. You're able to like use this Jupyter notebook format to take something that was like written up as a lab book, take some measurements, interact with the machinery, make a graph, make a report. All of those can be in one narrative thing. And this can also be really good. This year, I was trying to pitch like it's really nice to have these when you can't have in-person lab. But, you know, potentially what people are doing is like there's a video demo where somebody is like performing the lab experiment in the lab and then can give you the data, and then the students can work through the lab notebook exercise in a Jupyter notebook. So a lot of remaining work to be done here. I see this as a big frontier towards the future. It's very interesting how students in biology might not, you know, be necessarily like as familiar with math and stats as in other fields, but there's a lot of biology that is statistics. So it's another also a frontier where I think how can we bring biology students and bring them the comfort with these data science tools to sort of empower them as biologists. So there's a huge intro class, 700 student class. This is the biggest module that we've done. And they have, you know, a series, they have like a, you know, a lab manager and a series of like applied labs that they do. And this is one where we were able to sort of really nicely take their existing lab and apply it. And this is something that worked really well to keep it going in the pandemic. If you've ever been to UC Berkeley, there's a creek that runs through UC Berkeley. And there's the North Fork and the South Fork, and they come together in the middle of campus. And what they do is they go out and measure the, you know, invertebrates in the creek. And they come up with a measure of the diversity of these organisms that are living in the creek, and they're showing here in the part on the left how there's, you know, a statistical difference between the two, and then like if you tested by subtracting one mean from the other mean, here's like the histogram of possibilities, and here's your hypothesis showing that your difference is outside of what would occur from random chance. So this is a thing where like we have a lab experiment, but when we do it nicely, we can be actually teaching the statistical concept and giving students familiarity with like the application of the statistical concept as we do it. I really like this application in this notebook. There's another one that they did where, you know, this is like something you would go to online. It's like a simulation of a predator-prey module. You know, this isn't necessarily needing to be in a Jupyter notebook, but it's given students the ability to move things with sliders and change things around and re-parameterize the model and run the model again. And because it's in a notebook format, it gives students like a familiar place to go do the learning and then do some write-up of what they may have learned from the numerical model. And, you know, this application is a little bit, you know, related to things that are like web apps. There's different web apps ways to deliver this. But when it's in the Jupyter notebook, it's like, it's scaffolding what they're learning about how to work in a Jupyter notebook and in this big class and giving multiple different applications. And it's a really cool, you know, a classic of population dynamic modeling. So moving on to connector classes. The connector classes were motivated earlier by Michael Jordan as well, saying that, you know, the idea is it's a 2-unit seminar. The idea is you'd be in Data 8 learning the fundamentals of data science, and then this 2-unit seminar, you're learning an application out in another field, another discipline. And there's been a wide variety of these over the past 5 years. They're typically 2 units. Some of them have become 3 units. Some of them are ephemeral and they come and go. And some of them have stuck around, like statistics and comp sci. Those have become their own class and they meet some requirement and they live for a very long time. Data 8, I think, is 4 units. So these would be 2 units. That would be like a smaller seminar. And they're a little bit, you know, I can talk about this some more, but it's a little, it varies how much they are sort of meant to be taken at exactly the same time as Data 8 or after Data 8, and you get a wide variety of students in them. So the idea is like students are learning this practicality of coding, they're learning their first Python, and the professors who might be teaching the earthquakes class or the genetics class can take this little bit of Python that students are learning to program in and give them some applications about earthquakes or about genetics. There's a list of all the ones that have ever been taught at this link. And there's quite a variety of different courses that have been taught. These are new courses that are constantly being rebuilt. Once Data 8 was built, at the same time the connector courses came on, and then these were getting built. So these are unique classes. It's a little tricky because, you know, 2-unit classes don't necessarily give a faculty like, you know, that's enough time for a faculty. So sometimes they're taught by lecturers or postdocs or a faculty who might have just an extra interest. They don't always fit in well to like meet requirements. So that can be hard to have things be persistent in the university that's like really trying to meet its needs with all sorts of required classes. But these are new classes that were, there's a few new ones each year and a few repeated each year.
Something I wanted to add a little bit about this too is there are a couple courses that when taken with Data 8 will satisfy a statistics requirement for business, or when taken with Data 8 will satisfy the basic CS requirement. So students will choose to take these because they're much smaller. They get a little bit more attention and get to, I took one of these with my sister actually, because it was the only one that fit with our schedule and we both had taken Data 8. So it just really gets to go a little bit deeper into a subject rather than focusing too much on the like Data 8 content, which is the main course.
And I will just shout out to Juliet that she is a connector assistant. So she has stayed around in the program and is helping to teach the class that she took. So that's just a nice, a nice setup where, the students in the class, they want to keep working with us and they get to be part of helping the course. All right, so really quickly, this is my class, and this is in our 4th semester, and we have I will completely say we have an amazing group of undergrads who have helped build all this. Several of them are graduating, and it's really stressful to me the students keep moving on, and I have to stay behind and keep the course going, but there's a really strong basis. As you've probably heard in a few times, we have this Jupyter book. So once you start building your curriculum in Jupyter notebooks, there's a way to make an online interactive textbook from your lecture notes. And we can, adapt and change the textbook each semester. So it changes a little bit. This is just a nice one where there's like a Plotly interactive graph with a slider, and the Plotly you can save as HTML, and that fits inside your notebook. This is the very first thing that I started. I started 3 years ago with a single notebook doing supply and demand. And in, Econ 1, Econ 100, you have to basically draw this triangle and do the math. And what's the area of the triangle? And that's the welfare. That's the consumer surplus. The area below the demand curve and above the price line is the consumer surplus. And so I was like, all right, let's give students a way to like graph that in Python, measure the surplus in Python, see what happens when price changes, what it does to surplus, a bunch of these things that are like the basic concepts of economics. Let's have the computer draw and graph them for us, because otherwise we're just like spending endless time like pencil and paper and graph paper. So this is, for me, the 21st century way to teach econ. My goals with Data 88, connect data science and economics, give background to these economics concepts with data, use some of the techniques so the students are learning a bunch of techniques of, to do the analysis for the economics. And then students all are going to have to take econometrics. So if you're a lower division student and you're in Data 8 and you take my class, you're going to be much more prepared when you get to that econometric class when you're a junior. We also do some replication of paper. So this idea of like, oh, here's a published paper. Can we see an application of it in a lab book? We don't do this comprehensively, but that's sort of like what Jupyter Notebooks are for and what this framework is for. And then we also treat it as sort of a survey. So the second half of the class, you can, labor economics, behavioral economics, game theory will show you some topics and be like, this relates to this upper division class. And this is helpful to students that are like in their second year planning what upper division classes they're going to take. Bunch of guest lectures. Amazing thing about the pandemic is you can have people from wherever in the country come and visit the class. So we've had really great guest lectures this year. A lot of people who are recent grads who like did an applied honors thesis and they're out there working at like an investment firm, and they'll stop in and talk to the students about their career pathway, and students really love that. We also give them tools, so using econometrics, being able to look at literature, looking at a table in a paper and relate that to what you saw in class, learning LaTeX so you can see how econ papers are written. These are all basic tools for anybody who's an econ student as well. So yeah, there's a website for the class. You can see it's the same format as the Data 8 website. One other thing I want to say is like, yeah, it's a very popular double major. I think it's the #1 double major is data science and econ. Like of the data science majors, the #1 double major is data science and econ. So it's as just the setup for the class, we meet once a week for 2 hours. There's a lab each week. So, when I teach, it's like, I'll give a little bit of lecture about the concept, then we'll go into a lab, we'll do the data science of it, and then there'll be like, a homework that's sort of like a follow-up on the lab. And then there's 4 longer projects. Certainly the way this has worked by the students leaning in, students help teach, students help build the notebooks. The students are just like, they really like being part of this project. Here's just some other visions of the interactive textbook, the demand curve. This graph here, average cost, average total cost. Like when you teach microeconomics, this is on your midterm. Like this is what you need to do in Econ 100A, basic concept. And I just really like being able to put it in a framework that a Data 8 type student could do the things that is in a basic midterm for Econ 100A, but here it is in a Jupyter notebook, and you can manipulate it yourself. And you could change the price and see how the profit for the firm changes. This other one, this is another Plotly one that's like a 3D graph. This Cobb-Douglas production function is something that is seen throughout. And so it's just, for me, this is a way to motivate the math with the visualization a little bit more. This is like a mathematical representation that's used over and over in economics. But for me, being able to change the parameter and have a 3D look at how it graphs is really, helping them to get it like a slightly deeper understanding. Just taking things back, I want to go back. The way I got started on this whole thing was I was a lecturer at UC Berkeley. A lecturer is a very temporary gig. And I went to a summer workshop like the workshop you're at now. And they said, oh, we're looking for people to teach us connector classes. And a light went off for me. And I just love this idea that it could become really interactive to teach the stats. So I taught in fall 17, I taught a class on international development from my time in Africa. So the way I taught this class was I had a really good case study from Africa and a data set. And the data set had, already resulted in some preliminary papers or sort of working papers. And so I could take students from exploring what is it like to go to Africa, it's a problem that has epidemiology. It was about drinking water and child health. So in the picture, it's the mom of the youngest child asking about the drinking water protection. So there's public health, epidemiology. It's not just economics. It's all these different applied statistics fields are sort of involved. And the other part of my class that's a little bit lost that I liked was giving students messy data and seeing what they had to do to get from the messy data through to a finished graph later on. But this is sort of the passion part of how I got into it was from my earlier career when I was a development economist. So, the way I thought about the connector class back then was, I had a story to tell that was about safe water and sanitation, something that I was passionate about in public health, that I had, a previous part of my career that I cared about a lot. I had a messy data set. I had these, published journal articles and some unpublished results that were kind of interesting, and we could show the pathway of the data to get to represent through the notebook, get to where it would look like a graph you would see in a paper. And then, in the main Data 8 class, you would be learning a set of things. And I was exposing them to the, pandas, matplotlib, stats models. I took the liberty in this class to expose them to some more advanced packages and just be here's a couple routines in pandas. Here's how to make a really beautiful graph in matplotlib. Here's your first regression in stats models. That was just giving them an indication of packages they might see later. So just a slight aside, I don't have a standing in the economics department. I'm a lecturer for data science. I have been a lecturer for environmental economics in the past. But it is interesting to think about where is data science happening in the social sciences, right? In some ways, this whole data science movement is just happening in a disaggregated sense around campus. So this is from actually a year ago where I went and I picked up all of the classes that we're teaching in R, we're teaching in Python that might be using our data hub. Some of these people are colleagues that have come to us and have modules. Some of these are colleagues that have come to us and have connector classes. Some of them are people that already had their class. They just wanted to use the online computing platform. So they're using the data hub, but they did all the development themselves. This year, the big thing that we did this year was we have started helping the econometrics professor teach their required core class for the major using Jupyter notebooks. And it happened in our notebooks in the fall and Python Jupyter in the spring. So I think that will keep going. One thing that definitely happens is that the lecturer for the econometrics class changes, and so it depends what their flavor is. But we think that potentially we will keep going in the future, and proprietary statistics packages like Stata will be a thing of the past. So my point here is that data science is happening based on many different faculty taking on many different tasks, and we're just sort of supporting them in whatever way we can. Here's just a basic one. We're like, this is not a data science class. This is an economic of development class. So previously, this homework was give the students a PDF file, get them to download a copy of Stata, give them a copy of a CSV and get them to read it in. Now we can make a nice R Markdown file, deliver it them through the cloud to our studio in a browser window. We can make the whole assignment be in our Markdown file. And I think it makes the assignment much richer and like builds more skills. I will also say it's really pro GSI. There's a lot that helps. Like there's no paper involved. The cloud's there. The packages are installed. It works better for the GSIs. There's like a digital workflow for the GSIs and the grading that is compelling for the instructors as well. Here's one more. This is UGBA 96. This is I think that's the one that Juliet's the connector assistant for. So this is just a quote from Conrad Miller, who was a great young professor who was somebody who was working in Airbnb and then coming back to Haas. He wrote some great notebooks, and he was like, look, I got this great platform, like the Data Hub platform's just there. I wouldn't have done coding in this class otherwise, but it's so easy to with these notebooks and this platform there. And you can use R or Python in the same platform. So that was really robust. He just had some great notebooks that, related to like public school and social mobility and, this Chetty of like there's findings from Raj Chetty of like which types of institutions allow for greater social mobility. So like students don't see themselves directly in the data, but they're at this great public institution seeing that like, California public universities are really helpful for social mobility. Another one that we highlight, this one hasn't been taught. It was taught several times early on. There was amazing PhD students getting functional MRI, magnetic resonance imaging data. So really huge data sets of fMRIs, and they could pull the data into the data hub and be able to sort of measure signals in the data from different stimulus to the brain. So this is like, for me, the kind of thing of like a passionate grad student and postdoc being able to take something that I would say just a few years ago only a PhD student would be able to do this. But with these tools in place and this sort of like digital server in place, we're able to make this possible to undergrad students to do fMRI imaging signal processing. So that's one thing that I think is really promising is like the amount of compute and the ability to deliver the compute is getting students at a much younger, earlier on to be able to do more sophisticated things. And it would have been like, students, like only graduate students in their second or third year might have gotten to touch this data. And now we're able to give students this, like, this is what it's like to be a researcher earlier on. That's our presentation for now. I want to acknowledge that I've been letting the chat fly by over here. So let's turn over to the chat. The there's some chat about how great the CSUs are for social mobility. Awesome.
Also a question in the Q&A about funding.
Funding.
Answer that. I think Ksenia answered that. And then there's another question about has there been research or findings on whether students retain information from a connector course as opposed to a normal economics course?
That's such a great question. Oh man. I mean, yeah. There's a hypothesis, right? Like that I'm asserting that people who take my class will do better later on. I think there's a drastic selection problem where the people that choose to take my class are people that are interested in data science and economics. And so I can't really say, like, if you take my class, you'll do better in econometrics. I think so many times it's the students who select to take my class that are already interested in like adding the coding into part of their education. But I really hope to be able to measure things over time. We basically don't have like students who came up through this, but I will have that in a couple years. All right, I got to get back to some of these questions. Funding. Well, it's a little hard to explain, but there's a lot of this that was done really through, a low-cost bootstrappy approach. There is some like hiring lecturers, there's like some asking the dean, look, we're building something new here. We would like to get some small lecturer appointments. So there was like, certain times that there was like donor or dean driven, small appointments to people to make new classes, and that's hard and resources are scarce. A lot of the curriculum was made in sort of creative ways, getting students to help out, getting students to help build things. Certainly my class has a lot of like helping to build curriculum from the bottom up, from the students in the class. We just recruited, so it was just like, last May, the seniors are graduating. We're like recruiting students to help build and help be on the core staff for the next year. I can't remember, but it was like 75 students in the class, and like 17 of them asked to help with the class. So there's like a 20%, 20% like, can I help build more curriculum rate? So, which I was kind of blown away by. So there's definitely some of that. I will have to say on the module side, if you're interested in building those, finding other Python champions around your campus is huge. So I went and met with the people that are the earthquakes people, and they were already using Python packages, and I could explain like, here's what the Jupyter Notebook looks like. Here's how you deploy it. Here's how students read it. Here's how they turn it in. And they were able to like transform their class into a notebook-based class just because they already had some material there. I would say some of the econometrics professors definitely in the same place. They're ready to go to R. One of the first econometrics class was the environmental econometrics class that went 4 summers ago, and it's been running in our Markdown notebooks ever since. And that was like a graduate student who just like took it upon themselves, build out the curriculum. And it's very nice and modular. Like the next professor and the next professor can use this curriculum once it's there. What else is happening? Salome Addo is moving to California for a PhD. Data literacy education. Did you go to the panel before this? There was a connector class on data communication just before this. We have had some connectors that were on, there was an English one where people wrote novels about data. That was like, there's a history one where people did some history.
Was that person also talking about data literacy, like people having like access to data education education more so, like same kind of like media literacy. I don't know.
Right.
Still here.
That's a big thing that that we will probably need to work on more comprehensively in the future. I would say, like, the stuff that Aliana showed you early on about the modules and the AC classes, that's, for me, our premier effort in data literacy. It's not like per se, like we're taking on data literacy specifically, but we're bringing, data science familiarity to audiences that are, in many of cases, are avoiding taking, hard STEM classes, and they're staying to like some other part of the university where they won't have to take math classes. And we're like, hey, look, we can take you along on this journey. I think that, for us, like, we're going to need to build a data literacy class. There's a lot of interest in this, and building something out that's like got this fun notebooks and widgets and socially engaged questions, and build that into a whole class that's just offered directly. That's going to be, being built out right now. Do I know the number of double majors between data science and stats and data science and CS? No, there are a lot of them. It's very common. There are like 100, I don't know. I don't quote me on any numbers, but there's something like 700 grads this year. There's probably like 50 of each of those or something like that. I'm not quite sure. We can look it up. We can get back to you if you're really interested in that. How are modules funded? Some get paid through like division staff, like, but it's like people can take a class for units and do it for 1 or 2 semesters. If they stay on for longer, they can become team leads and get paid. So yeah, there's just core funding for this new thing as we build it out. And, grants were raised to start it over time, but now we're hoping to make it more sort of like core part of, what our division does. And we do keep fundraising for paying for some of these special initiatives. So did anybody click on this link? Should I go in there? Do you want to go in there? Oops. So would love to show you this notebook. I need to change what I'm sharing somehow. Hold on. So many tabs. All right. You see that? Hold on.
I think it's choosing lab 2.
Yeah. So there's a folder called Lab 2. And then in Lab 2, it's called what's it called? Tree Canopy Notebook. So the idea here, and on the first day, John De Niro mentioned the fact that geographically you can find a lot of things that correlate with the structural racism way that our cities are built. And this is another application of that. So this is not necessarily going to surprise anyone. This is also following on the New York Times did a really nice like data visualization graphic story on urban heat islands and the amount of concrete and the actual number of degrees. Okay. So this link that we sent out is Binder. If you click the link, the way Binder works, and unfortunately we haven't been promoting Binder enough. Binder is a free service for Jupyter Notebooks. And it just is going to spin for like 4 minutes, and it's just going to take a while to provision your notebook. But it is free. So the price of free is waiting for 4 minutes till the notebook comes up. But this is also really good to think about reproducibility. Like you could send a Jupyter notebook that's executable to anyone in the world, and anyone in the world could click on this link and see the analysis that you do. Anyways, I'm going to just step through the notebook a little bit more, but I lost the tab wherever it was. This is really hard. Too many tabs. Okay. What was I saying? The New York Times, you don't need an account on Binder. If you just click the link. Is the Binder link working for some people? The way they did it in the New York Times was on heat and redlining. This is a snapshot from the New York Times visualization. Worth reading: how decades of racist housing policy left neighborhoods sweltering. It's several degrees hotter in the redlined neighborhoods. So we went back and got satellite data to look at the amount of tree cover. Here's the redlining map for Oakland, Berkeley, and Alameda. The Homeowners Loan Corporation is a government project that's underwriting home loans, and so where home loans can be issued. And there are 4 grades, and the 4 grades are, I think, best, desirable, declining, and hazardous. And what this map can do is make an overlap between these Hulk grades and a contemporary map of Oakland and Berkeley. So this is where we are right now in Berkeley, California. This is the university. And the industrial and poorer neighborhoods that were undesirable, where you couldn't get a mortgage. And we then got satellite data on tree coverage. And this is a little interesting thing. So I will also say, like, in this notebook, the students don't need to do any code. So what the notebook is doing is just sort of explaining to the notebook, explaining to the student as they go through it, what they need to think about mathematically.
Depending on the course and who the audience is, the module, because this is a course that is for students who probably, the intention, especially given by the, was not to learn how to map things, learn about data can be used in their domain. Then we didn't a whole lot of this is how to code, this is how to start a table and a library and turn it into a map. But for some modules, we do take them through that. So it really depends on the audience and what the professor's goals are in this.
Yeah, this professor is amazing, Rachel Morello-Frosch. And if you ever looked up her work, and she does a lot of environmental justice work, and she's between the environmental science and the public health. So it's sort of like the interplay, and the class is actually cross-listed between public health and environmental science. Just to answer you, Jana, this is, in our typology, this is a module, not a connector. So a connector, there would be more programming for the students to do. This is what's like a module. So the students are in a public health class. They're not necessarily programming. So anyways, what they do is they think of how are we going to characterize the amount of tree cover in any given area. So this ABCD, we can look at the percent of tree cover and then make something up that's the average percent of tree cover in any shape. So these are like sort of mathematical representations of the greenness of any pixel, or using pixels. So, which is kind of interesting. So you're getting into some graphical stuff about polygons, and there's national data sets. We bring in a new data set that has the tree cover measure and the geometry of a polygon. So we're basically combining 2 data sets. We're giving students, here's the data set on Hulk grade, here's the data set on tree cover, and when we combine them, there we can do the analysis. we can make these colors, and then we can sum up, across these, how a sum up of this graph on the left would be like how much of each of these grades is the area in the study. So it's, some red, lots of yellow, a little bit of blue, and much less green. And for each of those, what percent of those have tree cover? So the desirable neighborhoods in the Hulk gradation in like 1940s, I don't remember exactly when it's from, have far more tree coverage than the undesirable neighborhoods. So this is, the planted environment 50 years later after these maps are drawn. I mean, as other people have observed, we could overlap many different things with this, many different environmental justice aspects of this, and we would see this pattern recurring and recurring because of systemic racism in our country. But this is one that's, taking satellite data about trees and comparing it to these historical maps. And I think they did it so that you can do it LA, Fresno, San Francisco, San Jose, Stockton, San Diego. Here's LA. Like, it takes quite a while to reload. There's LA. Oh, no, still Bay Area. Well, we'll wait gently and see if it works. Oh, there's LA.
I feel like tree coverage too is not something that we normally think about. Factors are something that is more generally talked about, but being able to bring in something like a tree canopy, which doesn't even city planning affects so many things, and the effects of it are like, how long does it take a tree to grow, and how does it affect the temperature? And then in addition to that, when you look at public health, then other health factors that affect that population that come from excessive heat. So just having that all brought in with data science to show how the application can be applied is something that is really special.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. That was just a illustration of a really great module that was made and deployed this year. Somebody asked if you can use them. Yeah, I mean, it's an open library. It's in this chat, github.org/ds modules. I would also say it's just, it's cool that, we can see how other people have done things. People can see how we have done things. I'm hoping that we could, make some of these. We have collaborations going on with universities in Atlanta, universities in DC. I was hoping maybe we could take some of these environmental justice or social justice ones and make them work, or, they will have something else that they would want to do in DC or Atlanta. We talked about this on the Data 8 panels, like how to make the examples more local and not about the Bay Area. So, how to make Data 8 resound and engage students wherever they are. It's definitely something we'd love to work on. But yeah, you can, all the notebooks are there. If anybody wants to look up and download and borrow the code, it's all published up there. Hey, Jill. Yeah, there are other folks out there for sure. Come to the next couple of days. So, after after today, after this panel, the next few days, you will see about 30 or 40 different instructors from different universities of all different sizes. You can see like a lot of other applications for different types of things. But there's a Data 8 panel tomorrow. There's a California panel. So you'll see other institutions not necessarily doing modules and connectors, but applying data science, building data science classes out at their institutions. We did a collaboration with Mills, and they taught some modules at Mills this year. We have a collaboration with UMBC. They have done some adaptations to Baltimore. So should be doable. Should be adaptable by an engaged professor who just has creative ideas about what the curriculum could be.
Thank you everyone for coming.
Thanks for coming to our panel. Get in touch with us, write to us.